WNST to the year. No weekly football around here. No Steve Bisciotti press conference. Not as of yet, anyway. Luke Jones joins us now to talk about sort of the only game in town up here that matters these days. That are the Maryland Terrapins. And, you know, the days of Tuesday night and Saturday afternoon, you can count on the ACC, right? The early game or the late game. Boy, these Big Ten games, sometimes you think the game starts at 8 o'clock and it starts at 6:30 or something. Maryland playing a ranked Michigan team out in Ann Arbor on sort of a sleepy night. Kids aren't back yet. Jim Harbaugh buzzing around trying to keep his gig out there. But, for the Terps, a really disappointing night, right? I mean, a night where they did enough to win early on, and then they don't guard an inbounds pass at the end. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, you can just see that all of their issues are really starting to catch up with this team on the road. I mean, okay, you lose at Michigan State. They were competitive for about the first 15 minutes of that game. Ohio State, a pretty similar story there. Michigan, I mean, it was a much better, more complete effort than we saw in those previous two road games. But they had the 4-minute scoring drought to start the second half. They have another 4-minute scoring drought that leaves them down 10 late in the game. I mean, they had the nice comeback, but you don't guard the inbounds pass, which to me kind of feels like a three-man rush late in the football game where, okay, if you're going to do that, you can't let someone get the inbound pass 40 feet from the basket and drive to the hoop, which is what happened. So, they messed up on the switch. I know Kevin Herter talked about that after the game, but, ultimately, I mean, this team they're just not good enough right now. There's way too little depth. Too many mistakes in crucial spots. We've talked about turnovers. I mean, Anthony Cowan, for as great as he was scoring the ball, had 6 turnovers. You have to wonder if him having to play virtually 40 minutes every single time out is catching up with him in just some key spots here and there. Kevin Herter hit the late three-pointer, which kind of masked what was a pretty uneven night for him. Just 4 of 11 from the field, but I mean, it's just. These guys just aren't good enough right now. They have, 8 healthy scholarship players. Jared Nickens had to play 30 minutes on Monday night. And that's not because Jared Nickens is worthy of 30 minutes. It's because they don't have anyone else. Joshua Tamajic is starting to get time, which, he's been okay at times. But when you're talking about really going only 6 deep when Dion Wiley's out with the concussion the last couple games, it's really difficult to win that way, and it's not making an excuse. It's just the reality for this basketball team right now.
Well, the hardest part is they had a chance to win. Through everything you're saying, and I agree with all of it, they literally at the last second of the game had a chance to win the game and didn't do what they needed to do to win the game. So for that, and I'm not a fire Turgeon guy, and it's just, I mean, dude, I'm so effing worn out on fire the coach and bench the quarterback. I mean, it's, this whole tenor of our sports conversation always begins and ends with fire the coach. It's abject stupidity, kind of like how we got this president. But I mean, when that is coaching. I mean, I'm not the guy that always wants to fire the coach, but you can't let them in. You can't let the quarterback throw a length of court pass and get it within a foot of where he wants to get it when you have a second left to make a shot that can beat you and then foul. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and in defense of Turgeon, just for that decision alone to not have someone on the ball for a full length inbound pass like that. Other coaches do that. I mean, we always think of the Christian Laettner play in the Final Four years ago. But
that one's been studied a little bit.
Right. But that said, when you do that, and then you allow Abdul Rahman to just get the ball and go right to the hoop, and if it wasn't for Bruno Fernando, kind of a leg block there, he's going to have a layup. I mean, that's how bad that was. You're going to be second-guessed, so how much of it's Turgeon, how much of it is execution? It's both, quite frankly. I think, reading some of the post-game comments, I mean, Anthony Cowan kind of said that they probably were celebrating a little bit too much in the post-game huddle because, Herter hits a huge shot there, but there was still 3 seconds to go at that point. So you're right, because of all the different shortcomings that they have right now. I mean, I didn't expect them to win on Monday night. I thought they had a chance. I mean, Michigan just just now cracked the top 25. It's not as though they're invincible or anything like that, but just knowing where this basketball team is right now with its depth, with its issues, front court, they actually rebounded quite well for a large chunk of that game, considering where they are with their lack of front court depth. But you're right. When you have a chance, when you hit a shot like Kevin Huerter did, and you need to play defense for 3 seconds, and really it's not even that long. You just need to play defense long enough that forces them to just chuck up a long shot at the buzzer. And
there's plenty of time to celebrate on the flight home and before Thursday night when Minnesota comes in. I was very, very disappointed with that, and it. Look, and I don't think they're winning the national championship. I don't think they're going to the tournament at this point. I mean, based on what I'm seeing, and this was the type of game that would have been a difference maker for them, because they're not going to have a whole bunch of chances to get quality wins here, because they're going to get waxed by Michigan State. They're going to get they're going to get destroyed by Purdue. Like this. I mean, if Wiley's not, if this is what they're going to play with, they're not going to beat good teams. They might beat Rutgers and Penn State or whatever, and they'll pad their record and try to become a 500 team in the conference or whatever. But these were the games that, at the end, you need 2 or 3 of these. They don't have enough of these left on their schedule to win enough of these that if they're going to take 6 teams in the Big Ten or whatever it's going to be in the middle of March, this is a game they had to win.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, at some point you got to look at the resume and say, well, what can you hang your hat on? And what do you hang your hat on right now? I mean, is it possible that they can play Michigan tough at home here in less than 2 weeks? Sure. Do I think they're going to win? No. Do I think they're going to go on the road and play at Purdue against that front court and have much of a chance? No. They didn't play very well against Purdue when they played them at home.
If they win one of those games, it'll speak for itself, but it'll be because they play defense like crazy. They shoot well. I don't even know what the formula is when you only have 6 or 7 legitimate Big Ten players and you're putting them on the court. And, I'm not going to say that Morcell is or isn't at this point, but he's getting way more minutes than you wanted him to get. Certainly, same thing with Cowan. Certainly, same thing with – everybody's playing more and even a little out of position. And, and then they come down with the flu over the weekend. Fernando only had 18 minutes the other night, and he's a guy that they probably need to get on the court 30, 35 minutes a game at this point. He's certainly one of their 5 best players. It's a mess. And look, I'm throwing darts here, and I'm not a fire the coach guy or whatever, but this is going to be an incomplete grade the rest of the way. And it's almost like if you lose your quarterback in the NFL. You're going to grade Mike McCarthy right now? I don't think so.
Yeah, I've had my concerns about Mark Turgeon in the past, and I still do, but I'm not specifically looking at the micro right now and saying fire him. I think there's certainly questions about him in the big picture as far as all this talent he's brought in at various times, and even going back a couple years ago with that team that had some Final Four aspirations and left you wanting more, quite frankly. But I'm with you from a standpoint of, Anthony Cowan played 40 minutes, Kevin Huerter played 36 minutes, Daryl Morcell 38 minutes. Bruno Fernando only played 18 minutes. He was sick. He gave them some contribution, not a whole lot. Obviously, only had 5 points, but the issues with Cowan and Huerter, there's no backup for what those two do right now. That is it going to be better a month from now? Probably not, because they're just going to be fatigued. I know Turgeon talked about it on Monday night after the game. I know he talked about it in Maryland's last home game, that he's trying to get Cowan and Huerter time off during practice. And the problem is they've been so banged up, they haven't even had, without those guys practicing, they don't have 10 guys to practice. If you're, unless you're just going to rely on walk-ons and team managers and stuff like that.
They got Bino out there running scout teams is what they're doing, literally, right.
That's just, and again, it's not an excuse. They clearly have things that are weaknesses for them. There's no doubt about it, but at some point you just look at it, and it's just like when Jimmy Clausen was playing in place of Joe Flacco a couple years ago. You can talk about next man up all you want, and then you look out there and you see Jared Nickens, who, look, I liked a lot when he was a freshman, but there's no way to sugarcoat how much of a disappointment he's been since then. When Jared Nickens has to play 30 minutes in a game, well, there you go. What
as long as it's not against Fairleigh Dickinson, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
He's not Justin Jackson, who was testing the NBA waters 7 months ago. So, it's just it's just where they are right now.
Well, it's a different level of expectation, and that's reality taking over for anybody in a red sweater wearing an M that thinks they need to win the national championship every year. I don't know that they were in that conversation this year, but they certainly could have won Monday night had they had a full complement of players. But that could be said for any of these teams. And, injuries are the big determining factor, I think, in modern sports everywhere, that you can't win without your quarterback. You can't win without your best players. And, and certainly when you're already challenged, this is going to be a tough couple of weeks ahead for the Terps, as I see it. And I think the big disappointment is Monday night could have been that one night you get that celebration, that you win that game you're not supposed to win.
Yeah. Monday night definitely had that feel that you could steal that one. And
it was quiet there, too, right? Like, for all the Michigan bluster and 120,000 seats in there, I find it really weird every time they go in there and play that, Jim Harbaugh comes and they all genuflect. They've won national championships there. That building always feels a little sleepy to me. Somehow.
Yeah. Well, I probably had something to do with it that they had 9 points about midway through the first half. They really, that Michigan team really started slow. And give Maryland credit. They defended well, they rebounded well, didn't give them many second chance opportunities. But that was a Michigan team that was a very sleepy performance for them in the first half. You go into halftime only scoring 20 points. But they came out, they played really well to start the second half. Maryland's defense really slacked off over that time, and it just some scoring droughts, which that's something that regardless of the injuries that they're dealing with, they've had issues with Mark Turgeon over the last several years with going through lapses where you don't score 4, 5, 6 minutes. There were a couple of those on Monday night, but with all their issues, they had a chance if they just guarded in the final 3 seconds, and they couldn't do that. And how much of it was philosophical? I think certainly plenty of us who watch a lot of basketball cringe when you see no one's on the inbound passer. And even if you're not going to do that, though, you have to defend way better. That was way too easy for Michigan at the end, and it makes for a long flight home and really disappointing because that was absolutely a chance to get not an eye-popping signature win, but a good win. Certainly a win that you can put on your resume and say, hey, we beat Michigan, and especially when we were so banged up, we beat Michigan, who had just cracked the top 25, but alas, wasn't to be, and Maryland goes back to the drawing board, and a pretty quick turnaround here with Minnesota coming in and just on Thursday night, and Maryland needs to, at this point, you just need to start winning games. They've lost 3 out of 4. I understand that they've been on, all 3 of those have been on the road, but we can stop talking about signature wins at this point and just say Maryland just needs to win games. When you're below 500 in the conference, and this isn't exactly considered an over-the-top stellar year for the Big Ten, that's not going to get it done. So they just need to start winning games and winning more games, and then you just come up for air at the end of the season and see how the chips fall and
go to the tournament.
Try to do some damage in the Big Ten tournament. It's not impossible for them to make the tournament, but it's certainly looking more and more like they're going to be on the outside looking in, that's for sure.
Minnesota on Thursday night. Luke will be courtside. I'm hoping to make it down to College Park. That is an 8:30 tip. Really is weird. You have to watch game times, right? If you look at the game times for the next 12 games, 8:30, 7 p.m., 1 p.m., 8:30 p.m., 1 p.m., 6:30 p.m., noon, 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 7 p.m., noon. Be careful with the Terps. I made that mistake on Monday night, So 8:30 Thursday night, Minnesota. The Gophers coming in, and I remember the damage that was done at the barn 2 years ago to the Turtles in that good year where I'm still crying for that kid from Minnesota. I don't remember his name, but I'll never forget that evening out there. Luke, last thing for you on the basketball side of things here and watching the Big Ten, and just big picture on this thing. As an old ACC guy, I would sit and watch Wake Forest play Florida State in the late game some nights, right? I find the Big Ten thing to be fascinating because I do not watch Purdue and Michigan State play, right? And I don't even watch Golden State and Cleveland play on meaningless Monday night games in the middle of January. But it is fascinating that I don't do enough scouting. Like Indiana, the Terps play Indiana at the end of the week. Since they sort of fallen off the cliff and Harbaugh's brother-in-law got canned and now he's on the Big Ten Network instead, I've kind of fallen away from something. I'll keep an eye on Michigan State and Purdue because they're at the top, but I can't say that I ever watch Northwestern or Nebraska. And these games are on every night. I mean, every night I'm flipping through and there's some Minnesota Northwestern game on, but I don't know. It doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. I mean, I enjoy watching Purdue and Michigan State. Certainly Purdue with the front court depth, the front court production they have, and how good they've been. Michigan State. Michigan State was always one of those teams that I kind of paid attention to, even long before Maryland got to the Big Ten. But you're right. I mean, and I guess in fairness, I can't say that I necessarily would be glued to the TV if it was a Clemson North Carolina State Wednesday night game on ESPN or Raycom Sports or whatever with the ACC network back in the day. But definitely, it's still an adjustment period for all that. I mean, I get it. I mean, the financially driven decision. We've talked about that at length over the last 5 years, but
you would have been hard pressed to get a Clemson North Carolina State game in the old ACC unless Dan Bonner showed up. All of these games are on now, so you could literally sit every night and nerd out on Big Ten basketball if that's what if that was what you chose to do with this, right?
Yeah, and some of that's almost the problem, right? I mean, you have all these games on TV that you kind of take it for granted, whereas back in the day, you only were going to have so many games.
Yeah, Duke's on the night. So what if they're playing Miami? I'll watch them. It's Duke, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, it's definitely different. There's no doubt. But keep in mind, the ACC had changed drastically when they expanded from 9 teams and they added Virginia Tech, Miami, and Boston College. From that point on, ACC basketball wasn't the same either. It just when you have that many teams in the conference, and clearly with Maryland, there's not the old rivalries. There's no familiarity there. I mean, it's going to be a little lacking. And
this is going to be my get off my lawn moment and say, you don't remember the Big East. You don't remember those bloodbaths, Jones.
Oh, yeah, of course. I think of the ACC and when Maryland first got really good under Gary Williams, and you think of the Big East. I mean,
tackle basketball.
I went to Syracuse with the end of the great Big East era.
He never cheated. Boeheim never cheated.
Right.
Ever.
I'm not going to touch that one, but yeah. I'm laughing. You can hear my response to that.
Well, I guess it just is interesting because in a year like this where Maryland, you could sort of throw the towel in at this point that they're not going to be very good. You keep them on. There's no sort of basis to get, it's much like the football side of things, right? Like, I know you are completely disinterested in Maryland football as a fan, as a guy who lives in southern Pennsylvania, who runs around with the football team, runs around with the baseball team. You've sort of given up on Terps football. And if you've given up on Terps football, then chances are you're probably watching Alabama play Georgia on a Saturday much more readily than you're really caring about Michigan State taking on Purdue or whatever in football as well, even though the football is good, and Ohio State and Penn State, all that. And I'll keep an eye on those games, but I find myself gravitating toward watching SEC football more on Saturdays when I have that opportunity, when I'm somewhere else, than sitting around and pining away about some, Indiana, Ohio State game or something like that,
Yeah, well, and from a fan standpoint, I mean, it's different for, guys like us who are, not that you and I talk a lot about Maryland football, but when you have a team that's not relevant in terms of contending in the division, in the conference, then the incentive to pay closer attention to the other teams in the conference isn't there as much. I mean, even with the Terps right now, I mean, you look at them, they are tied for 7th in the Big Ten right now. They're 4 games back of Purdue and Ohio State in the loss column now.
Yeah, it's easy to make other plans on Thursday night at 8:30. It is.
Yeah, and that's not to say that I'm writing the Terps off completely, but you just look at where the reality is with them. Going back to Terps football, I mean, look, I think DJ Durkin's done a nice job with the talent he's brought in. If they can keep a quarterback healthy at some point, it'd be interesting to see where they'd wind up. But if you ask me if I truly believe that they're going to be in serious contention for a Big Ten title at some point, I'm going to say no. I mean, maybe you get that weird, first year of Ralph Friedgen kind of scenario, like where Maryland was in his first year and going to the Orange Bowl. Maybe you catch lightning in a bottle, but for football, it's certainly that way. And basketball is a little different because Maryland's been very relevant. That they've been right there in the Big Ten since joining the conference from a basketball standpoint. But this year, definitely, with the issues they're having, specifically on the road, the lack of depth, knowing how many minutes Cowan and Herter are having to play, it's really feeling like this thing could snowball and not be very, very pretty by the end of the year. But you hope that they can show some resiliency and.
Well, there's no margin. There's no margin for foul trouble for Kevin Herter. Yeah. There's no margin for Bruno Fernando has the flu. There's there's literally, and Cowan is really the glue that holds the whole thing together. I mean, he's a pretty good player.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he's a pretty good player as far as Maryland players go. And, we put Trimble up on, some sort of pedestal at various points. And certainly all those players they had 2 years ago were good players individually. But I don't know what, 40 minutes a night. You can't expect anybody to do that in the Big Ten. I don't.
Yeah, and it's one thing to say, well, 40. There are examples of great players going the distance. I mean, you see it in the NBA from time to time. But to ask someone to have to play 38 minutes, 39 minutes, 40 minutes, 37 minutes. I mean, that's on a regular basis every single game. I mean, that's a lot to ask. And but. I mean, if Anthony Cowan's not on the floor, who's running the point? I mean, it's Kevin Herter can handle the ball. He can run the point, but you want to get rest for him. So, when you're talking about backups for those two guys, it's really, really tough. And again, people are listening and say, "Well, you're making excuses." It's reality. It's just where they are right now. But again, going back to Monday night makes it very frustrating because they had a chance, as well as they played in the first half. As much as they struggled at times in the second half, it was right there. Kevin Herter had hit the huge shot, shaking off a rough night for him with hitting 2 threes late, but wasn't to be. And Maryland goes back to the drawing board now, under 500 in the conference, and another one of those chances at a good win to put on the resume slips through their fingers.
He is Baltimore Luke at on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. I am Nasty at WNST.net. We'll be down doing the Terps thing on Thursday night. They take on Minnesota in more Big Ten play. And then, of course, after that, on to Indiana over the weekend, and then Michigan State and Purdue the week after next, I should say, as we get out to Minnesota for Super Bowl 52 coverage. We're also running a Ray Lewis bus to Canton, Ohio, and the Pro Football Hall of Fame we expect on the weekend of August 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. All information will be up at WNST.net a little later in the week. I'm getting all of that together as we speak. Nasty at WNST.net if you want that information first. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. The buyatoyota.com audio vault is there for you 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. Anytime you want to listen, you can listen live. You can download the TuneIn Radio app and listen from wherever you happen to be. Purple Rain 2 is being released daily. Chapter 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all coming out this week on Ray Lewis, O.J. Brigance, on the legend of Joe Flacco and the drafting of Joe Flacco. All that information there. Every morning it will appear in the morning newspaper. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. $10 a month, never any commitment, the Lunk Alarm, and always judgment-free. 2018, no better time than now to visit Planet Fitness. I want to remind everyone, when the Orioles deal Manny Machado to the Arizona Diamondbacks for 2 bags of baseballs and some good Mexican food, you'll get that first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home. It is the SSV on WNST, getting you ready for championship game weekend. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.